The diplomatic vessel Horizon drifted through the cold emptiness of neutral space. Inside, Lavra Mitchell stood at the observation window and watched the distant stars. She had seen many things in her 42 years of life. She had fought in wars that most people only read about in history books. She had killed enemies with her bare hands and watched friends die in her arms. But today, she was not a soldier. Today, she was simply a mother traveling with her children. Ryan and Amy Mitchell sat at a table behind her, playing a card game they had invented during the long journey. They were 14 years old, twins born 3 minutes apart on a cold December night. Ryan had his father's dark hair and his mother's sharp eyes. Amy had inherited her mother's brown hair and her father's gentle smile. Their father had died 5 years ago in a mining accident on Mars, leaving Laura to raise them alone. The Horizon was carrying a delegation of human diplomats to meet with the Zinthri Galactic Empire. The Zinthri had ruled 1,000 star systems for 10,000 years. They were ancient when humanity was still learning to use fire. They viewed younger species as insects, useful only as servants or entertainment. Humanity had achieved interstellar travel only 60 years ago. To the Zinthri, humans were barely worth noticing. Lavra had been asked to join the mission as a security advisor. Her years in special forces made her valuable, even though she had retired to raise her children. She had agreed to come only because the mission was supposed to be safe. A simple meeting, an exchange of diplomatic pleasantries. Nothing dangerous. She had been wrong. The Zinthri flagship appeared on their sensors 3 hours before the scheduled meeting. It was massive, a vessel the size of a small moon, covered in weapons that could destroy planets. The human delegation felt a chill run through them as they approached. This was power beyond anything humanity had ever built. Commander Threxus met them in the reception hall of the flagship. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 arms that ended in clawed fingers. His eyes were black pools that showed no emotion. He looked at the human diplomats the way a person might look at insects. Crawling across a floor. The meeting began with formal greetings and empty promises of cooperation. Lavra stood near the back of the room, watching everything. Her children had come with her because there was no safe place to leave them on the Horizon. She had told them to stay quiet and stay close. Threxus noticed them after an hour, his black eyes fixed on the twins with sudden interest. He said something in his own language to his guards. They laughed, a harsh sound like metal scraping against stone. Lavra felt the hair rise on the back of her neck. She had survived a dozen battlefields by trusting her instincts. Right now, her instincts were screaming. Threxus walked toward the twins. The human diplomat stopped talking, confused by the sudden change in his attention. Lavra moved to intercept him, placing herself between the alien commander and her children. "These are your offspring," Threxus said. His voice was cold and flat, like wind blowing through dead trees. "Human children are rare outside your protected systems. The High Sovereign collects specimens from every species we encounter. Your young ones would make excellent additions to his menagerie." Laura's hand moved toward the weapon hidden beneath her jacket. "My children are not specimens. They are not going anywhere with you." Threxus smiled, showing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "You misunderstand. I'm not asking." He raised one of his 4 arms. 20 Zinthri guards stepped forward, weapons drawn. Lavra moved faster than any of them expected. Her first shot killed the guard closest to her children. Her second and third shots dropped 2 more before they could react. She grabbed Ryan with one hand and Amy with the other, pulling them behind her as she fired again and again. But there were too many. A blast caught her in the shoulder, spinning her around. Another hit her leg. She fell to her knees, but kept firing, kept fighting, kept trying to protect her children. It was not enough. The guards swarmed over her, pinning her to the ground. She screamed and fought, but her wounded body could not break free. She watched helplessly as other guards grabbed Ryan and Amy. Her children screamed for her, reaching out with desperate hands as they were dragged away. "Mother!" Amy cried. "Mother, help us!" Lara tried to stand. A guard struck her across the face, and she tasted blood. She tried again. Another blow knocked her back down. Threxus stood over her, looking down with those empty black eyes. "Your species is young and foolish. You do not understand your place in the galaxy. The Zintari take what we want. We have done so for 10,000 years. Your children belong to the High Sovereign now." "I will find them," Lara said. Her voice was quiet, but something in it made Threxus pause. "I will come for them. And when I do, I will burn your empire to ashes." Threxus laughed. It was the laugh of someone who had never known fear, never faced a true threat, never understood that the universe could hold anything more dangerous than himself. "You are welcome to try, human. It will be amusing to watch." The Zintari fleet jumped away, taking Ryan and Amy with them. The human delegation was left drifting in space, their ship damaged. Their mission destroyed. Lara lay on the cold floor of the reception hall, bleeding from a dozen wounds. The other diplomats rushed to help her, calling for medical aid, speaking words of comfort that she did not hear. She was not listening to them. She was listening to the echo of her children's screams. She was feeling something cold and dark growing in her chest. Something that had been sleeping since she left the military. Something that she had hoped would never wake again. The diplomats saw a wounded mother lying in a pool of her own blood. They saw a victim of alien cruelty, someone to be pitied and protected. They did not see what was really there. They did not see the most dangerous thing in the galaxy opening her eyes. Lara Mitchell had been a soldier once. She had put that life behind her for her children. But her children were gone now, stolen by creatures who thought themselves gods. The soldier was awake, and she was going to war. Lara spent 3 weeks in a hospital on Earth. The doctors healed her wounds with advanced medicine that would have seemed like magic a century ago. They fixed her shoulder and repaired her leg. They told her she was lucky to be alive. She did not feel lucky. She felt empty. The diplomatic corps sent representatives to visit her. They spoke of formal protests in official channels. They assured her that negotiations were underway, that the Zintari would be made to understand that their actions were unacceptable. They promised that her children would be returned through peaceful means. Lara listened without speaking. She knew these people meant well. She also knew they were wrong. 2 months after the taking, a transmission arrived from the Zintari Empire. It was broadcast on every frequency, meant for all of humanity to see. The message showed Ryan and Amy in small metal cages, wearing collars around their necks like animals. A Zintari voice explained that these human specimens were now part of the High Sovereign's collection. The voice thanked humanity for the gift. The transmission ended with laughter. Something broke inside Lara that day. Or perhaps something finally came together. The grief that had been drowning her burned away, replaced by something hotter and colder. She stopped crying. She stopped hoping. She started planning. Her first call was to Admiral Daniel Carter, commander of Earth's Third Fleet. She had served under him 20 years ago, back when she was young and the galaxy was still a mystery. He was an old man now, with gray hair and tired eyes, but he remembered the soldier Lara had been. "I need your help," Lara said. The Admiral sighed. "Lara, I know what you want, but we cannot go to war with the Zintari. Their empire has 1,000 star systems. We have 47. Their fleet outnumbers ours 100 to 1. If we attack them, millions of humans will die." "Millions of humans will die eventually anyway," Lara replied. "The Zintari see us as insects. Today they take 2 children. Tomorrow they take a colony. Next year They take Earth itself. We can fight them now, when we choose the time and place, or we can fight them later, when they choose. You are asking me to start a war over 2 children. Lavra leaned forward. Her eyes were steady and calm, but the Admiral saw something burning behind them. I am asking you to start a war over every child, over every human who will ever be born. The Zintari took my son and daughter because they believe we are weak, because they believe we will do nothing. If we prove them right, then we are already defeated. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. He had known Laura for 2 decades. He had seen her do impossible things on battlefields that should have killed her. He had watched her walk away from the military to raise her children, trading weapons for bedtime stories. He had always known that the warrior was still inside her, waiting. Now the warrior was awake, and she was asking him to follow her into hell. Even if I agreed, he said slowly, we cannot defeat the Zintari in a straight fight. We do not have the ships or the soldiers. Lara smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had already planned 10 moves ahead. We do not need to defeat their entire empire. We need to hurt them badly enough that they will never forget. We need to rescue my children and show every species in the galaxy that humanity will not be treated like prey. She placed a datapad on the table between them. The Admiral picked it up and began to read. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the information. Where did you get this? I spent 2 years as a diplomatic advisor. I watched and I listened. The Zintari believe they are strong, but they are weak in ways they do not understand. Their empire is built on conquered species who hate them. Their military is spread across too many systems. They have not fought a real war in 5,000 years. They have forgotten what it means to face an enemy who's not afraid to die. The Admiral set down the datapad. He looked at Lavra with new respect and old fear. You want to start a rebellion. I want to rescue my children. If a rebellion happens along the way, that is not my concern. The Admiral laughed despite himself. It was a tired laugh, the laugh of a man who knew he was about to do something that would change history. What do you need? A ship, a crew, authorization to operate independently in Zintari space, and your promise to bring the 3rd Fleet when I call for it. That is a lot to ask. My children are worth more. The Admiral stood and walked to his window. Outside, the lights of Earth's greatest city glittered in the darkness. 8 billion humans lived on this planet, and billions more on colonies across the solar system. They were farmers and teachers and doctors and artists. They were parents and children and lovers and friends. They trusted their leaders to keep them safe. Daniel Carter had spent his entire life protecting humanity. He had always done so carefully, weighing every risk, avoiding unnecessary conflict. But sometimes, he knew, you could not avoid conflict. Sometimes you had to choose between safety and something more important. He turned back to Lara. I will give you the assault carrier Resolute. Captain Kevin Brooks commands her. He is a good man, and he owes you his life. Take whoever you need. Do whatever you must. Find your children and bring them home. Lara stood. For the first time since the taking, something like warmth touched her eyes. Thank you, Daniel. Do not thank me yet. You are walking into the mouth of a monster. The chances of survival are almost 0. Lavra was already walking toward the door. She paused and looked back over her shoulder. The Zintari made a mistake. They took my children because they thought I was weak. They thought I was just another human, easily frightened, easily controlled. They were wrong. She opened the door. I am coming for them, and I am bringing humanity's fury with me. The door closed behind her. Admiral Carter stood alone in his office, wondering if he had just saved humanity or doomed it. In the end, he realized it did not matter. Lavra Mitchell was going to war whether he helped her or not. The only question was whether humanity would stand with her. He picked up his communicator and began making calls. Humanity was going to stand. The assault carrier Resolute was not the largest ship in the human fleet, but she was fast and tough. Her hull was covered with scars from a dozen battles. Her weapons could tear through enemy armor like paper. Her crew had been chosen from the best soldiers and sailors humanity had to offer. Captain Kevin Brooks met Laura at the docking bay. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and kind eyes that had seen too much death. 20 years ago, Laura had pulled him from a burning dropship on a moon whose name he had forgotten. 10 years after that, she had carried him 3 miles through enemy territory with a bullet in her own leg. He would follow her anywhere. "The ship is ready," he said. "The crew knows the mission. They know the odds." Every single one of them volunteered. Laura nodded. She had expected nothing less. Humanity was young among the stars, but they had never lacked for courage. The Resolute departed Earth orbit at midnight. By morning, they had crossed into Zinthri space. Laura knew that a direct attack on the Zinthri homeworld was impossible. The planet called Throne Prime was protected by 12 battle stations, each one armed with weapons that could destroy moons. The High Sovereign's palace was a fortress that had never been breached in 10,000 years. Even if humanity sent every ship they had, they would be destroyed before reaching the surface. But Laura had not survived 20 years of warfare by fighting fair. Resolute traveled deep into Zinthri territory, avoiding patrols and hiding in the shadows of dead stars. Laura had studied the Empire during her time as a diplomatic advisor. She knew that the Zinthri ruled not through loyalty, but through fear. Dozens of species lived under their control, conquered and enslaved over the millennia. These species hated their masters. They simply lacked the power to fight back. Laura planned to give them that power. Their first stop was a mining world called Korvath 7. The Kovathi were small beings with 4 eyes and nimble fingers. They were brilliant engineers who had once built ships that sailed between galaxies. The Zinthri had conquered them 3,000 years ago and forced them to work in mines, digging up metals for the Empire's war machines. Laura met with the Korvathi, leaders in a cave deep beneath the planet's surface. She did not offer them kind words or empty promises. She showed them something else. She showed them the transmission of her children in cages. She showed them the military intelligence she had gathered. She showed them the weak points in the Zinthri defenses. "I am not asking you to trust humanity," Laura said. "I am asking you to trust your own hatred. You have been slaves for 3,000 years. Your children have never known freedom. If you help me strike at the heart of the Empire, I will give you a chance to break your chains." The Kovathi leader was old and scarred. He had watched his people suffer for generations. He had dreamed of rebellion and buried those dreams under the weight of despair. But looking at this human woman, he saw something he had never seen before. He saw a fury that matched his own. He saw a warrior who would not stop until her enemies were destroyed or she was dead. "What do you need from us?" he asked. "Ships, weapons, your knowledge of Zinthri technology. And when the time comes, your engineers on my side." The old Kovathi smiled for the first time in 50 years. "You shall have them." From Korva 7, the Resolute traveled to a gladiator world called the Blood Pits. Here, the Mrenxi fought and died for Zinthri entertainment. The Mrenxi were large beings covered in thick scales, with 4 arms and teeth like knives. They had once been the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Now they were forced to kill each other while Zinthri. Audiences cheered. Laura fought her way into the champion's quarters with nothing but a combat knife. When the Mrenxi guards tried to stop her, she killed 3 of them before the others backed away. The Mrenxi respected strength above all else. This small human woman had just earned their attention. She spoke to the champion of the Blood Pits, a massive Mranxi named Gorthek who had won 100 fights. She offered him the same thing she had offered the Korvathi, a chance for vengeance. "The Zinthari think you are animals," Lavra said. "They put you in cages and make you fight for their amusement. But I have seen what your people can do. I have studied your history. You were conquerors once. You can be conquerors again." Gorthik studied her with ancient eyes. "And what do you get from this, human? Why should we bleed for your cause?" "Because my cause is your cause. The Zinthari took my children. They have taken everything from your people. Together, we can make them pay." Gorthik threw back his head and roared. It was a sound of pure joy, the cry of a warrior who had finally found a battle worth fighting. "The Mranxi will follow you, human. Lead us to war." The final stop was a prison world where the Psyloxi were held. The Psyloxi were telepaths, beings who could read minds and share thoughts across vast distances. The Zinthari used them as interrogators, forcing them to tear secrets from the minds of prisoners. The Psyloxi hated this work. Each interrogation left scars on their own consciousness. Lavra did not need to speak to the Psyloxi. They read her thoughts the moment she entered their cell block. They felt her pain and her fury. They saw the fire burning inside her, the flame that would consume everything in its path. One by one, the Psyloxi bowed their heads. "We have waited a long time for someone like you," their leader whispered in Laura's mind. "We will be your eyes and ears. We will help you see what the Zinthari try to hide." Lavra gathered her new army and laid out her plan. The Korvathi would build weapons and modify ships. The Mranxi would provide ground forces. The Psyloxi would coordinate communications and gather intelligence. The humans would lead the assault. Meanwhile, on Throne Prime, Ryan and Amy Mitchell waited in their cages. They were thin and tired, but they had not given up hope. They had watched and listened. They had learned the routines of their guards. They had found weaknesses in the palace's systems. They were their mother's children, and they knew she was coming. The Zinthari homeworld had never known fear. For 10,000 years, Throne Prime had stood as the center of the greatest empire the galaxy had ever seen. 12 battle stations orbited the planet, each one a fortress of metal and fire. The High Sovereign's palace rose from the capital city like a mountain of gold and crystal. 1 billion Zinthari lived on this world, secure in the knowledge that no enemy could ever reach them. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Admiral Daniel Carter stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Titan. Around him, the Third Fleet waited in the darkness between stars. 300 human warships, the largest force humanity had ever assembled. Behind them came the Allied fleet, Korvathi engineering vessels bristling with new weapons. Mranxi war cruisers filled with eager warriors. Psyloxi scout ships serving as communication relays. The Admiral had received Laura's signal an hour ago. One word. Now, he looked at his officers. They were young, most of them. They had never fought a battle like this. None of them had. "All ships," he said quietly, "jump to Throne Prime. Attack formation. May God be with us all." The fleet vanished into hyperspace. They emerged in the skies above the Zinthari homeworld like a storm of fire and steel. The battle stations opened fire immediately, their weapons painting the darkness with killing light. Human ships died in the first seconds, torn apart by beams that could crack planets. But humanity had not come to retreat. The Korvathi engineers had modified the human ships during the journey. New shields absorbed energy that would have destroyed them. New weapons punched through Zinthari armor like needles through cloth. The Allied fleet struck with a fury that the Zinthari had never faced. The first battle station fell within an hour, overwhelmed by a combined assault of human and Mranxi ships. The second followed minutes later, its crew fleeing in panic as Korvathi boarding parties tore through their defenses. By the third hour, 6 stations were burning or destroyed, but the cost was terrible. The Admiral watched his display as ship after ship went dark. Good men and women, dying in the cold silence of space. He forced himself to watch. He owed them that much. "Hold the line," he ordered. "Keep their attention on us. Lara needs time." On the surface of Throne Prime, chaos reigned. The Zinthri had never prepared for a ground invasion. Why would they? No enemy had ever reached their world. But now shuttles were falling through the atmosphere like rain, carrying Ranksy warriors who had waited 3,000 years for this moment. The Resolute dove toward the capital city. Captain Kevin Brooks gripped the controls as enemy fire tore at his ship. The hull was breached in 3 places. The engines were failing. Half his crew was dead or dying. He did not stop. "Lavra," he said through the communication system, "you have about 3 minutes before this ship falls apart. Get to the drop bay. I will put you as close to the palace as possible." Lavra stood with her strike team near the deployment doors. 30 soldiers, the best humanity had produced. They carried weapons and explosives and enough ammunition to fight a small war. Each of them knew they might not survive the next hour. None of them cared. "Kevin," Lavra said, "when we jump, break off and get to safety. Find somewhere to land. We will call for pickup when the mission is complete." The captain laughed. It was the laugh of a man who had already accepted his death. "There is no breaking off, Lavra. The engines are gone. Navigation is destroyed. I am going to crash this ship into the main military base outside the palace. Should keep their reinforcements busy for a while." Lavra closed her eyes for a moment. She had known Kevin Brooks for 20 years. He had been at her wedding. He had held her children when they were babies. He was one of the best friends she had ever had. "Kevin, do not say goodbye," he interrupted. "Just bring your kids home. That is all the thanks I need." The Resolute screamed down through the atmosphere. At the last possible moment, the deployment doors opened. Lavra and her team jumped into burning air, their descent suits slowing their fall. Behind them, the assault carrier continued its dive. Captain Kevin Brooks aimed his dying ship at the largest concentration of enemy forces he could find. He thought about his own family back on Earth. He thought about Laura's children, trapped somewhere below. He thought about all the battles he had fought and all the friends he had lost. He smiled. Resolute struck the military base at full speed. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun. 3,000 Zinthri soldiers died in an instant. Their reinforcements would never reach the palace. Lavra hit the ground hard but rolled to her feet. Around her, the strike team formed up. The palace gates stood before them, massive doors of golden metal guarded by 5,000 Zinthri warriors. 5,000 against 30. Lara raised her weapon. "They took our children," she said. "They put them in cages. They laughed at our pain. Now we show them what happens when you hurt a human family." She started walking toward the gates. Her team followed. The Zinthri guards watched in disbelief. These humans were not running. They were not hiding. They were walking straight into the heart of the Zinthri Empire with nothing but weapons and rage. The guards raised their rifles. Lavra smiled. "Open fire." The battle for the palace began. It would be spoken of for 1,000 years. 30 humans against 5,000 Zinthri, and it was the Zinthri who learned fear. Every corridor became a killing ground. Every room became a trap. The humans moved with perfect coordination, covering each other, advancing step by step, leaving piles of violet blood behind them. Lavra was at the front, always at the front. She moved like a ghost, appearing where the Zinthri did not expect, killing before they could react. She took wounds that should have stopped her. She kept fighting. Her eyes burned with something the Zinthri had never seen before. The guards began to break. They ran from the small human woman who could not be killed. They spread tailies through the palace of a monster in human form, a demon that no weapon could stop, somewhere deep below the palace. In the darkness of the menagerie, Ryan and Amy Mitchell heard the distant sounds of battle. They heard the explosions and the screams and the gunfire. They looked at each other and smiled. Their mother had come. Lavra fought her way through the palace like a force of nature. Her armor was cracked and burned. Her weapons ran dry, and she took new ones from fallen enemies. Blood dripped from wounds she did not feel. Nothing could stop her. Nothing would stop her. Of the 30 soldiers who had followed her through the gates, only 11 remained. They moved in tight formation, protecting each other as they descended deeper into the palace. The Zintari had stopped trying to fight them directly. Now they were sealing doors and collapsing corridors, trying to slow the humans down. It was not working. Lavra reached a sealed blast door and placed explosive charges on its surface. The detonation tore through metal that was supposed to be invincible. She stepped through the smoke and kept moving. The Psyloxy had given her a map of the palace before the assault. She knew exactly where the menagerie was. She knew exactly where her children were being held. Every step brought her closer. Above ground, the battle continued. The orbital defense grid was falling, station by station. Admiral Cotter had lost half his fleet, but the Zintari losses were worse. Their commanders were panicking, sending confused orders, making mistakes they had never made before. They had never faced an enemy that refused to retreat. On the streets of the capital city, Ranxi warriors ran wild. They had been slaves for 3,000 years. Now they were free, and their rage was boundless. They tore through Zintari soldiers with their bare claws. They howled ancient war songs that had been forbidden for millennia. They were magnificent and terrible. High Sovereign Velrix watched the chaos from his throne room. He was ancient, older than most stars, a being who had ruled the galaxy before humanity had learned to walk upright. He had never known fear. He had never known defeat. Now he knew both. His advisors were screaming at him to flee. His generals were dead or running. His palace was burning around him. And somewhere in the depths below, a single human mother was coming to take back her children. Velrix stood from his throne. He would not run. He was the High Sovereign of the Zintari Empire. He would face this human and show her that he was still a god. Lara reached the menagerie level and found herself facing the last line of defense. 50 elite guards, the best warriors in the Zintari military, stood between her and the cells where her children waited. Their commander stepped forward, a massive Zintari covered in medals and scars. "You cannot win, human," he said. "Even if you kill us all, you will die here. Your children will remain in their cages. Your species will be exterminated. This is the end of your foolish rebellion." Lavra looked at him with eyes that held no mercy. "Let me tell you something about humans," she said. "We are not brave because we are not afraid. We are brave because we are terrified, and we fight anyway. We are not strong because nothing can hurt us. We are strong because we keep going after we are hurt. You have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years because no one challenged you. But you made a mistake. You took my children." She raised her weapon. "And now I am going to burn everything you love to the ground." The fight was short and brutal. Lavra lost 4 more soldiers. But when it was over, the elite guards lay dead on the floor, and Lara stood at the door of the menagerie. She entered slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. Rows of cages lined the walls, filled with creatures from across the galaxy. She ignored them all, searching for the only faces that mattered. She found them in the deepest corner. Ryan and Amy looked up as she approached. They were thin and pale, wearing the collars of captivity, but their eyes were bright and their smiles were wide. "Mom," Amy whispered. "You came." Lavra tore the cage door off its hinges with her bare hands. She pulled her children into her arms and held them so tightly she thought she might break them. Tears streamed down her face, the first tears she had shed since the day they were taken. "I will always come for you," she said. "Always." Ryan pressed something into her hand. It was a small device, cobbled together from scraps and stolen parts. "I have been working on this for weeks," he said. "It is a key to the palace's internal systems. I can shut down their security from here, open every door, free every prisoner." Lavra looked at her son with fierce pride. "You are your mother's child." She handed the device back to him. "Do it." Ryan activated the device. Throughout the palace, locks clicked open. Alarms fell silent. Security doors slid apart. The creatures in the menagerie began to stir, realizing that their cages were no longer sealed. Chaos erupted. Prisoners who had been held for centuries suddenly found themselves free. They attacked their former captors with the fury of the long oppressed. The palace guards, already overwhelmed by the human assault, found themselves fighting on a dozen new fronts. Laura led her children up through the burning palace. They moved quickly, dodging fires and falling debris. The Siloxy spoke in her mind, guiding her toward an exit that was still clear. They emerged into the light of a new day. The sky above Throne Prime was filled with the wreckage of battle, but the human and allied fleet had won. The orbital defenses were destroyed. The Zinthari military was broken. A shuttle descended to pick them up. Laura helped her children aboard, then turned for one last look at the palace. High Sovereign Veilrix was being dragged from the ruins by Mrenxi warriors. His golden robes were torn and stained. His face showed an expression the Zinthari had never worn before. Defeat. Laura watched him for a long moment. "Remember this day," she called to him. "Remember what happens when you threaten human children. Remember the cost of your arrogance. And know that if anyone ever tries this again, we will come back. We will always come back." The shuttle lifted off, carrying Laura and her children toward safety. The war ended a week later. The Zinthari Empire collapsed, fractured by rebellion and defeat. The species they had enslaved claimed their freedom. A new galactic federation rose from the ashes, built on principles of equality and mutual respect. Laura returned to Earth as a hero, but she did not care about fame or glory. She cared only about her children, safe in her arms, home where they belonged. Captain Kevin Brooks had survived his crash, pulled from the wreckage by Mrenxi warriors who had seen his sacrifice. He would walk with a limp for the rest of his life, but he would walk. Admiral Carter retired to write his memoirs, knowing that he had helped change the galaxy forever. In bars and ports across 1,000 worlds, beings of every species told stories about the Battle of Throne Prime. They spoke of the human fleet that had challenged an empire. They spoke of the allied species who had risen up together. They spoke of the warriors and the engineers and the telepaths who had fought as one. But most of all, they spoke of Laura Mitchell. They spoke of a mother who had looked upon the greatest power in the galaxy and said, "Give me back my children." They spoke of a woman who had walked through fire and death because she would not abandon the one she loved. They spoke of a fury that could not be stopped, a determination that could not be broken, a love that could not be defeated. The Zinthari had ruled through fear for 10,000 years. They had believed that fear was the strongest force in the universe. They were wrong. The strongest force in the universe was a mother's love, and the galaxy would never forget it.